Good morning. It is Thursday, December 28th, and it's actually about 5:15 in the morning right now where I live in Jersey. So this is one of those days I get to do this. First thing, knock it off my list for the day. I shouldn't be interrupted. The kids are actually not in the house since last night, which is fantastic, and I'm not waking anybody up by causing any noise in my home. Um, this is a book I've actually been wanting to do for a little bit. At work, somebody had mentioned about this book about 3 months ago, and it caught my interest, so I immediately actually went to the library, put it on a list. I think originally I was like number 15 on a list, so it was going to take a while to get to me, but all of a sudden we checked, my wife and I checked about 3 weeks later on, and I was like number 2. So I don't know if they had just gotten a whole bunch of more copies of this book in the library, or if people just dropped off. Or maybe they read it so damn fast that my number came up early on the list than I thought it was going to be. But I'm actually pretty happy because I'm going to meet with this client maybe today or tomorrow, and I get to discuss that I read it and, well, have a nice conversation about it. But this, right now, what I'm going to do here might be a little bit different than ones I've done in the past, because I think I'm going to talk more about what's in the book than just a quick little overall review, due to the fact that it has almost like a niche market for readers, and it deals with cryptocurrencies that will either grab people and bring them in, or people like, I have no idea what that is, therefore I would never even open a page of this. So, let's get started here. As always, I'll show you what the book is as it washes out with my lights behind me. So this is Michael Lewis, and he wrote this Going Infinite, The Rise and Fall of a New Tycoon. Okay. You see here, not relatively thick, about 250 pages. And like most books that are about either the market failures or a crash of a business or whatever else, it's a quick read. You can pick this up and blow through it relatively fast. I usually could as well. Unfortunately, I'm also reading a bunch of other books that I'm recording audiobooks for, or just reading for other people and getting into discussion groups. But in the meantime, I couldn't read this as fast as I wanted to, but I made sure I got it done. One of the things I had, thankfully, a little time crunch on this is I did get it from the library, and there's other people on the list behind me. So I wanted to make sure I read it within my original time allotted and not try to renew it to get to the last, 3 chapters. So I buckled down, finished it up, wrote copious notes on my board up to my right, and I will discuss it right here. So, what's this about? Start very broad. Cryptocurrencies. Okay, everyone's heard of cryptocurrencies. No one truly understands them, but they know people are out there, and they're trading them. And there's always, that one guy around that just wants to turn the discussion into crypto no matter where you are, thinking he has the most knowledge and he's going to bring that novel idea to the table. Okay? But just understand they exist. This book will go into more detail of what they might be, but in the meantime, people found a way to have this almost like Star Wars credits. There's digital currencies out there, but like anything else, there's a market for these things. Some people will create one that mean nothing, no one wants it, the value is very, very, very low. In fact, I think there are some almost like porn cryptocurrencies out there, which probably don't mean too much, except for the people really, really into that. And then obviously people know about things like Ethereum and Bitcoin. They're practically on the exchange. They're used commonly going back and forth. Well, sometime in the middle of the 2010s, like 2016, 2017, whatever else, things like Bitcoin got this huge jump in value. It went from almost like $1,000 per coin up to almost $20,000 per coin. So people who actually were in this and had this in their pockets, they mined them or they bought them, whatever the case may be, the value went up so much it created new rich people overnight. And the person that this book is about Sam Bankman-Fried, Sam Bankman-Fried was one of those people. He had a ton of Bitcoin. And when the value went up, he's now practically in the top 20 or top 40 of Forbes' richest people in the world. But, who is he? No one knew who he was. He was a mystery. He came out of nowhere. And that kind of happens with some of these people who get rich in this kind of fashion, where it's a matter of they happened upon money, however they did, and now everyone wants to know who they are, what their secret is, how can somebody maybe become you or become wealthy like you on their own. But it's a matter of being in the right place at the right time, and it's very, very hard to replicate that in things like wealth. So eventually this guy opens up, he's got businesses, he's got his own exchange, he opens up a trading fund, and, all of a sudden, like I said, the world wants to know who he is. So this whole thing is about him, the empire he created, the empire he destroyed, and everything in between. So let me go back a little bit on, who is this person? So he's kind of an odd sock. He was almost introverted. He was the kind of guy that dressed exactly the same way every single day, which you've probably seen with other rich people. Think of like Steve Jobs, always with like the black turtleneck and the jeans. That was his look. But this guy's look didn't have that kind of fashion to it. He was like cargo shorts every day, rumpled up t-shirts. His hair's all tousled up, and his thick dark curls and what they term in the book called the Jufro. Just an unkempt looking kind of guy. But it was kind of like that Einsteinish, like he actually had a decent brain. He was very, very smart. So his appearance he didn't care about. He wore what was comfortable. That's all he wanted to do. Didn't think about it. Just, this is my clothes that I like, and moved on forward. If his mind's working like a mile a minute, that's how he kind of was. Like they had him in a conference room or an interview, his knee would be shaking on the table, underneath, bopping up and down about a mile a minute. He was never a calm and at rest type of person. He was like always just frantic and never wanted to be where he was. I mean, I think a lot of stories in this book talk about how he'll be in an interview, maybe a Zoom interview or a phone call, and the whole time he's doing this interview, he's playing with video games off to the side. Like zoning out the meeting, zoning out the interview, and just playing his game to sometimes like pause it and then come back and say something which might not even be on topic and then go back away again. But with all this, he's 29 years old. And he's worth, like I said, about $20 billion. Furthermore, not many people, like he didn't really have many friends, so no one knew who he was. He was just like a puzzle as far as like, oh, what is Sam Bankman-Fried like? So, and not like he's a man of mystery. He's not an enigma. Just no one got close to him, and he didn't get close to anybody. No one knew him. So it kind of like increased the whole, everyone wanted to interview him to unlock the personality, to unlock the person, and let the world understand who he is. But you're talking about a guy who's got no social skills, and he just didn't care to get to know people. So that's why it was, no one could actually say, oh yeah, Sam is that kind of guy. Nope, didn't work. But he's a rich man. He's rich, so everyone wants to know who he is, what makes you wealthy. I mean, all the interviewers, presidents want to know who he is, celebrities, they all want to come out of the woodwork and be in the room with him, sports icons, you name it. It was a very much like, I want to be close to the wealth, and that will up my own persona just by being there in the room with him. Now, being the way he was, it didn't help that every time he was asked, to meet up for a certain reason or to have an interview, he would say yes to everyone. It was like his default to say, yes, we're going to meet next week. but then he wouldn't show up. I think they say he did like one out of every 10 meetings or interviews that was ever set up. So now he's pissing people off who are trying to get to know him to help him, mainly to help themselves sell more airtime or sell more books. But if he would have some kind of meeting, no one knew where he was. He didn't show up. But he might have gotten on a plane and flown off to some other country for something. Maybe he's just, hey, I've never been to Baghdad before, and he would just, boom, fly to Baghdad. Or maybe he has this idea in his mind about the next score, the next thing he wants to invest in, or the next thing he wants to do for the future or for people, and he just goes and does it, and just blows off all his interviews or whatever else. To the point that eventually he had to hire somebody. Actually, no. Someone he had hired had taken it upon herself to, keep his schedule, remind him of things, tell him, hey, are you going to be there? Are you not going to be there? So I can tell them in advance, as it's ethically nice and get it going on. But, someone had to make that their full-time job. Where is Sam? Where should he be? What should he talk about? Yada, yada. So now, you've got to fill a bunch of pages with a book, and you're trying to tell people in the world, through this book, who this guy was. It actually delves into his childhood for, a little bit of a meat of the book. So, here, he's got enough information to give you a small little bit of a story here, but it doesn't tell you much. He was, just, I don't want to say he was a special kind of guy, because that almost entails he's got some kind of, mental alternative to a person that you might think was like normal or something like that, which I know is the wrong word to use, but I'm trying to convey the thought here. But you're trying to look like, where did he come from? How did this person get to where he was from what he was when he was growing up? But in the meantime, it just talks about a really awkward kind of kid. He was one of those kids that didn't like school. The smart guy who didn't like school. But again, at the time he was a kid. How many kids do like school? It's a lower percentage than the people who don't. But he was one of the don'ts. Easily bored. The mother would bring him to an amusement park. And he would try to appear to have fun to make his mom feel good for taking him there. But in the meantime, he wasn't. It was one of those things where he would even ask, is this how people are supposed to have fun? It just didn't capture his mental activity. It didn't capture his funny bone. It didn't do one of those things that kids would enjoy because you're being thrown up in the air and come back down again or spun around in a circle. He just didn't care about it. It bored him. Another thing, when he was a kid, he was talking about talking with other people. And there was the whole thing with facial expressions. And then you can talk to me, and while you're talking to me, maybe I'll smile. Maybe I'll get angry. I'll do something with my face that would convey an emotion to you. But young little Sam couldn't read them, didn't like them. It's like, why are people wasting their time with facial expressions? Just tell me how you feel. Use your words. So, it never picked up on those clues and never thought that they were an effective way to communicate to begin with. It all went in part of him being just so bored. So eventually, as things progress and he's not doing well with school and he's not the most social kid in the world, he eventually does latch onto something that gets his mind and mental acuity working, which is games. Certain games, strategy games, things like that, really grasped his attention and gave him that hyper focus that he might need or might want for his life. Primarily things like Magic the Gathering, the trading card game, came into his life. I mean, here's something that someone had created in the 90s that was, hey, what if people played cards against each other in such a way that they can actually bring their own cards to the table and personalize their deck to be their strategy? And if you did something like this, what would happen is no two games would ever be alike. No two opponents would be alike. They had a plethora of cards to choose from, and even like different varieties of the cards. They can bring them in their own type of combination that they can say, all right, I want to fight you in this game now, and let's see who wins. The strategies would change constantly, and it just gave him that. It was something for his mental acuity to actually like concentrate on. And during finding this, he even found a friend or two, so it was actually good for him as well. But as you play this game, the company, to make money, would actually send out some like new versions of the game every so often, or expansion sets. And the thing was, new cards would be sold on the market, which then would change people's decks, which would then change their strategies, which then changed every game you played. So this kind of boiled down to the permutations of playing this game, and that fascinated Sam. So what's happening here is now he's starting to get into mathematics more. He's starting to, even enrolled in a math camp, which gave him something to focus on and challenge himself against others for the betterment of math. He picks up a Rubik's Cube because now he's fascinated by all the mathematical combinations of this cube and how do we get to roll them and get them to where they need to be. And this is going to be pretty prevalent later on, because it's going to drive a lot of what you see later on in his career. Now, when his career starts, he actually finds this one trading group called the Jane Street Capital. And when he gets there, he goes through one of those interviewing processes that you might have heard online. Like people go into Google and they sit down and the interviewer would say something like, how many tennis balls can you fit inside a jet? And the whole purpose of the interview question is not so much to answer it, but to show your thought process on how you would go about answering it. You might ask qualifying questions. What's the size of the tennis ball? How big is the jet? Are there seats inside? And then start saying things like, okay, mathematically, if a ball takes up this much space and a jet's got that much space, then it would take so many to actually fill that space perfectly. But it was the whole process of trying to figure things out, which is why people would ask you the question to begin with. And there are tons of questions out there that you can look up. Actually, they're very funny on certain interview questions from places like that. Well, Jane Street was the same way, but I wanted to see your analytical mind in process, because you can use that same analytics in order to predict what certain stocks would do, or where certain industries would have an uptick that you can get in before the uptick and make the run up on capital that you would actually get a bunch of profit out of. And Jane Street was pretty interesting with the employees itself, because one of the things that they had done was they would practically be playing games all day. It would always exercise the muscle, but they also wanted to see you put this in action, not only just answering questions from an interviewer, but against each other. And they would actually let people bet to each other throughout the day. It kind of kept them on their toes in such a way that it made them better traders than people who didn't do this kind of thing. And we're talking about things like that were actually useful in a way, like coin flips or dice or betting on other people's bets. These two people get into an agreement and someone says, hey, I think that guy's going to win or that guy's going to lose. Or I bet that he goes down that route and that's how he tries to win the bet. And other people are taking this on the opposite side too. And it created a huge subgroup of people who were pretty much gambling addicts because they did it all day long. One of the examples they actually give in the book is, a guy put a bet out there with the question is, what are the odds that I have a relative that's a professional baseball player? And then Sam would start thinking about this, saying like, well, how do you define relative? Because that might increase the odds. And exactly what do you mean by professional baseball player? Because the manager might be included in that list as well. And then once you get some of those details down there, it's like how many teams are there, how many numbers of players are in every teams, and what's the population of the country or the globe or what have you, and come up with a number which actually is more relatively likely than one would think originally. But these are the kind of games that they would play during the day. And they do word games with each other too as they're just sitting there at their desks, where they're trying to figure out, like, give me the answer to, like, it's a word game, so it's like, all right, aboard Britney Spears. And the answer is an idol. Someone who's idle, who is an idol. And they would play those all day long. Keep their mental acuity going. So what this did was, as people were doing these kind of question and answer and the bettings and looking at the odds and looking at the likelihood, just like the Magic the Gathering, this is where the permutations came involved. How many different ways can this actually come about and achieve the result that's required? What it does do on its underlying is it was developing quantitative thinking. And later on, around this time, probably even a little bit earlier, a lot of programmers got involved in trading. And they were called quants. They were the quantitative aspect of trading. It was the kind of thing where they said, all right, I'm going to put a formula together, maybe even use a bot to trade the formula. And the formula, by the way, is an algorithm. I'm going to put together an algorithm that will mathematically predict the market. And this went above and beyond what used to happen when people had like a broker or a trader who had a gut feeling. I want to go into the market in pharmaceuticals because there's a certain pill coming out there, and I have a gut feeling that this is going to go through all the different levels of approval, and it's going to be great for the world, and everyone's going to want it, and then boom, we're going to make a ton of money. No, a quant will go through, have the formula saying, all right, if it hits certain metrics, boom, I'm going to buy it because I know it's going to be good. Or I'm not going to buy it, maybe even short it, because it's not going to work out, and it's going to fail, and we'll make money on the failure. So, quants. Quants are the thing that become the future, and that's what Jane Street Capital was actually creating. Then the other half of the formula for Sam on this, because now we got like the trading, the wealth, the quantitative. Now there's more of a drive that's very important. And with the drive, the question came out, what do you want to do for a living kind of thing? What do you want to do for your career? And most people would say, I want to do good in the world. The work I do, I want to be able to actually use it to help people. Okay? But what does that mean? And exactly who accomplishes that goal? I want to do good in the world, but you're a cashier. Unless you're a very high paid cashier, I don't know how much good you're going to do in the world outside of assisting people getting through their lives, maybe very smoothly, fast, you name it. But in the meantime, how many people are trying to actually do good in the world? They actually asked the question in here saying, who accomplishes more for the aid of humankind? A doctor or a banker? When you think about it, you're like, well, a doctor deals with patients every day. He'll see many patients, or she'll see many patients every day, and therefore, they're doing good in the world. And yes, because they're doing good in the world, they're getting a better reward in terms of pay and salary. So a doctor definitely does a bit more good in the world than a banker could. A banker just plays with money. But a banker makes money. He finds ways to have the interest of the clients come in, and he puts that money to work to make even more interest for himself. But a banker who earns a lot of money does have the potential of maybe donating his funds and getting like 5 or 7 doctors to go out to a country like Africa and save the kids out there. So now you got 5 or 7 doctors from the banker's point of view versus 1 doctor. So originally, like, hey, one doctor helps people directly every day. They're the better people for mankind. But then the banker is able to bankroll 6 or 7 of these guys. So maybe he's doing better work than the doctor. Again, when you boil it down, who does a better work or who's doing good, it's more quantitative. And how many lives can you save at being a doctor versus being a banker? Now, the interesting thing is, in order for the banker to take some of his wealth and actually bankroll 5 to 7 doctors over in Africa, he has to be altruistic. He has to be saying, I want to put this money in this capital to work, and I want it to actually do good in the world. You know, I'm not looking for rate of return on this one. I'm actually donating this. So the world, or people at large, would actually want an altruistic banker to be in existence because they would save more lives than going to school for 7 years and becoming a genius doctor. And obviously the caveat being here, yeah, but what if the doctor actually invented this certain valve, a certain whatever, that saves many, many, many more lives? That's true as well. Again, part of the quantitative decision. How many doctors are inventors? I'm sure there's a ton because they're actually in that industry, but when you do the full numbers, how many doctors become inventors versus how many altruistic bankers can fund more doctors in the field? Granted, both are good for everyone, but if someone wants to do the most good, which one do you go with? So the altruistic banker, which might be a unicorn out there, he's the one who will earn money to do good with the money. Now, this next part's pretty interesting. I learned recently about what's considered the trolley problem. Okay, I'm going to put a link down below to a wiki page on this. But it's essentially one of those things, it's a thought experiment of saying, okay, you see a train coming down the tracks, and you're much further down the track. But you see that this train is actually going to go through, and it's actually going to run over 5 people who are bound and gagged on the track. But in front of you is a lever, and if you pull that lever, it's going to divert the train and save those 5 people. However, there's one person on the other track. So if you divert the trolley and hit and make sure it doesn't hit the 5, you will hit the 1. So the trolley problem, the ethical question it says is you have a decision to make. You could do nothing, in which case the train will continue down the track and hit the 5 people. Or you can pull the lever, in which case the trolley will go to the side track and hit the 1 person. So there's doing nothing and doing something, 5 versus 1. And it's the kind of thing that it makes you think, well, you know, do I save the most people or what have you? And it also goes into like your ethical, like, what would you do? You know, do you think that doing nothing and the 5 people dying meant that you didn't put them in that situation, you didn't cause it, so the fact that you did nothing and they died doesn't mean it's on you. Whereas if you pull the lever and it goes to the 1 person, you did that. You chose that person to die. So there's a whole conversation of what this actually means. Now, interestingly enough, there are people who have taken that example and gone really far with it. They've actually put other motivations for you, like things you would know. Like, for instance, it's not just kill 5 or kill 1. There's, you know, but the 1 is a thief and actually, like, murdered a woman once. Okay, he deserves to die, we'll save the 5. Or it's one of those things where of the 5 people, 2 of them will move on and maybe, like the doctor in the above conversation, create something or invent something that saves so many lives. Like maybe they come out with the COVID cure that we never get COVID ever again. Any variant, anything else. Okay, you want to save those people. But of the 5, there's 1 who's going to go down such an evil route that they might kill twice as many people as those two people would save. Now, would you let the 5 die or not and go for the 1? So, again, thought experiments, things to just discuss amongst yourselves, and it's an interesting problem. Now, why would I even bring this up? What's the purpose of this for this book? One of the things that happened is when Sam was at Jane Street, he wasn't satisfied with making money. I mean, he did it, he was good at it, but he had nothing to do with it. But then some people came out to meet him and talk to him, and he actually met some people from like back in the day, and he starts learning about a new concept for him called an effective altruist. So we talked above about the banking altruist or the altruistic banker. Now we're talking about people who are what they call effective altruists, EAs. This is the kind of concept that's going to drive the rest of his career, drive him to do what he did, and unfortunately drive him to the result of what he did. So it's the kind of thing of saying, not only are these the people who can make money, but these are the people that want to put it into practice. They aren't people who wish for peace among the world. They're the people that want to do something to get there. They're the people who actually want to go out and build houses in areas that they can have homeless move into. Let's take care of the homeless problem. Let's get some people on their feet, and now they might actually become more important members of society. Wash up, keep the cleanliness going on. Get off the streets. You don't need money by doing whatever else. Think of San Francisco. They got homeless shelters, homeless on the street everywhere. People are robbing cars and breaking into the windows in such record numbers that people now park on the street with their windows open and their glove box open and nothing inside. Let the thieves know there's nothing in this car to steal, and therefore don't break my window. People living on the streets are literally defecating on the sidewalks. So maybe the altruist gets in there and will set up, more permanent homes for people with plumbing, with showers, maybe even provide them with certain necessities, get food in them, and now you've got that element off the street. Now you've got them actually not polluting any longer from that aspect of like physical polluting the ground. And maybe they'll actually be able to do something that helps other people. And then that, the probabilities and the permutations of what would happen from there would just filter out almost like chaos theory would. Effective altruists, people who actually take what they have and put it into use. Okay? I kind of think of this as a causality thing. They want to put the money into the field. And this could be anything. I've actually seen things online where a person goes to like a lake that is completely like green and algae covered, almost kind of polluted-ish, and he comes up with this enzyme or this chemical that he can introduce it to the lake. It clears up like you're down in the Caribbean, and the water might even be drinkable. So he takes what's just a stagnant pond and makes it into like effective water. Now, a cost of that would be, well, what about all the microbes and the bugs and the critters that live in the algae? Now they're gone or whatever else. Again, quant. You got to play with the odds. What's more effective for the world? This, that, and the other. And it's funny, you can't talk about causality without bringing into your mind the Merovingian from those Matrix movies. Cause, effect. I should put a picture up here for that as well. Going back to Sam. So when he's at Jane Street, one of the things they talk about a lot in this book too, very interesting chapters I thought, which was you can look at markets, you can be quantitative, you can try to make your money for whatever purpose you want to make your money for, but in the meantime, when you're seeing things in the market, the most important thing is trying to find out why it occurs. You see markets do a movement every day. Fine. You can actually put your trades in at certain times of the day, and therefore you will make huge profits and take it to the bank. But why is the movement happening? There's got to be an underlying cause for this, and that's what you got to figure out. That's the kind of thing you can either replicate or know when to put your thing in action. And there's a few examples there. There's like 3 I got here, which is very interesting. It started out very simple. In America, the price of oil goes up. But then people realize when in America the price of oil goes up, there's some Nigerian stocks that go up as well. So if you know oil goes up, you can buy the Nigerian stocks and make yourself a killing. Okay. Unfortunately, with some of the markets, the Nigerian exchange might be closed. So if they're closed, you can't buy those stocks right now. You're kind of like in a delay. You can't wait for the market to open, and by that time it might be too late due to those off-hours trading. Okay, but what you can do in the U.S. market is you can actually get into U.S. ETFs. ETFs are exchange-traded funds, and in them they have other securities. So an ETF, maybe it's an index of some sort, might have Nigerian stocks in them. So while you might be barred from buying the Nigerian stock right now, you can buy the ETF that has the stocks in there and still get the benefit. And because it's a US ETF, it's on the same time frame with the market that oil was on. So you see the oil go up, you buy the ETF, the next day, prices soar. You made your killing. Fantastic. But why did it happen? Just knowing that it goes up and Nigeria goes up, you got to go one step into it and figure out, why does the Nigerian stock go up? Or down? I think it works in both directions. So now it gets that question in your head, why is this happening? Why is this happening? A second example of this actually is something regarding South Korea and Tokyo stocks, where someone realized, hey, when South Korea stocks go up, 12 hours later, the Tokyo stocks go up. Okay, if I know that happens, every time I see the one, I can get my trades in there and make my money, and then the Tokyo, boom, does their thing. So, going to the Jane Street method, why does that occur? And they actually found the reason for it was a single trader in Germany. And that trader, every few days, he decided he was going to buy stocks in South Korea and in Tokyo. So what he would do, though, is he personally would put in all his trades in South Korea. And because he's buying it, the price is going to increase. But then he would lay off his trade to his Tokyo counterpart and have him do the other half of the trades when he wakes up in the morning. So if the global markets were open constantly, he would buy the one, buy the other at the same time, and no one would find the difference in the two, except for how long it might take for him to buy the one and then turn and buy the other. But because he's having someone else do it for him, there was a 12-hour lag. So because of that, people can be like, okay, I know if one goes up, the other goes up later. I now know why. I'm confident that I can go in there and make these trades and there'll be no change in it. I just got to keep my mind on that guy. Keep an eye on him as well, because it could be the fact that one day he stops doing that. And if that's going to happen, you're going to lose this potential that exists there. There's a third example of this too, which I thought was also very interesting, which was a Canadian example. So someone had seen, for some reason, that every single morning at 9:30, all the stocks would either go up or down. That was aberrant for the market at its time. But once this happened at 9:30, at 9:31, it would all restabilize and kind of go back to normal levels. And if you had the timing perfect, you could get between the stocks, between that 9:30 and 9:31, if you had a very accurate program and you can take care of this. But again, Jane Street Capital, why? Why did this thing happen for a minute every day? And then through the digging, it turned out they figured it out. And there was a trader who had a trading bot that would go out there and make all these trades for him. They were like multi-billion-dollar option trades that were on the market. So the thing would be, if the stock ever went up, when the Canadian stock market goes up, he would buy more of the Canadian index, which then would cause it to go up a little bit more, and then he would buy more. And this works in both directions. If it went down, they would sell, get out, sell more. Okay? So this guy doing such huge bulk trades was causing a fluctuation for a couple minutes. Now that it's identified, traders started betting against this. And by doing so, when this guy put through his trades, they would get the gain and then get out immediately, and then the guy would put in his other trades and whatever else, and that would happen as well. So they were feeding off of the bot, working in its opposite in order to do what it wasn't doing to get the benefit of the growth or the decline. So basically, what they, by the way, as people were making a killing doing this, it was killing the dude that was taking care of this himself in Canada. So he actually eventually turned off his bot. This never happened again, and then people had to go on to the next good idea. Okay, so basically what we're talking about here is people at Jane Street were able to like reverse engineer the algorithm that made this trading effective originally. Again, why does something happen? If we figure out the why, we figure out the root cause, we can then do what we need to do effectively in either the opposite direction or go along with it and get some gains. And this is one of those things that actually could benefit anything. You know, you have a problem at work, the system shuts down for 3 seconds, or it blinks, the lights blink off, whatever else. And eventually it's like, why does this happen? And why does it happen at a certain time every day? And you dig, you figure it out, you take care of that, because you don't want to have a building that maybe someone's on life support, and when the lights blink, it disconnects for a second with the possibility that it won't reconnect. So finding out why something happens is better than just banking on it and making benefits off of it. Okay. That got pretty technical for a while. I understand that. Again, I kind of like this kind of stuff. That's why I really got into it. But let's just talk more about the book. All right, so now what happens then for the rest of this thing is now you've got a person who has his wealth, knows how to generate more wealth, is in these industries that can take care of these things. He has crypto, knows crypto. So what happens next? Well, like I said, the next half of the book talks a lot about the crypto market, gets you more into details of who the big players are. A lot of names pop out there, which I had never heard before, but I'm sure someone else who was in the industry would know that. Sam goes out there, he starts the firm, there's successes, there's failures. He tried a program bot for crypto exchanges as well, where he would like look for that little margin between that exchange over there and this one over here, and if you can time it just right, you can gain that differential. Almost like people try to do that with the sports books in Las Vegas. This guy's doing 6 points on a spread, that guy's doing 6.5 points on the spread. Let me do a quick bet in between there, maybe bet both sides, and I'll earn that half a point in between. And then it goes and it has whole sections on crypto hackers, rogue traders, death threats coming through, possibilities of government shutdown and the seizure of all assets in the country, places like China and Taiwan or whatever else, you know. And it just brings you along until you get almost like to the end game of this whole saga. So it pushes everything towards that big picture. Profits come in. You take those profits, you send them out into the world. Your efforts attract more altruistic bankers. And when you get all the effective altruists together, not just people who are talking about doing well, but the people who have the capital to put into action. And all of a sudden, this wealth gets so big and it creates markets that Sam goes out there and he creates his own crypto exchange. Almost like a future option exchange, too, called FTX. And he knows his own algorithm for this should be flawless, and he wants to actually be good with countries doing it legally. So he creates a very good product. But once you make a product, you now have to get people to use it. And then it goes into his whole efforts on trying to like get the advertising out there or get celebrities to endorse it in some fashion that'll make it good. He's looking after Michael Jordan. He's trying to go for the Kardashians. Whatever he can get out there to get his product to the street, he's going to try. However, while he's doing this, and he's got a crypto exchange, and he's also got some trading fund called Alameda, behind the scenes, it doesn't even look like a company. There's no structure. There's no CEO, really. There's no risk assessments. There's no board of directors. Hell, there's no books and records for the most part. There's no accounting. I'm actually an accountant, so that kind of thing is like, wait a minute, you kind of need that. There's no accounting for this. And it turns out that this whole FTX exchange hasn't been sanctioned by America yet. The SEC didn't understand the crypto enough, or didn't like the controls that weren't offered over it, or the transparency that can happen in between. They didn't like the Wild West attitude of it. Therefore, they did not allow this FTX exchange to be used by American investors. Therefore, they weren't sanctioned to have a U.S. bank account, which is pretty important sometimes if you want to get more investors in to use your product. You know, it's almost like, if I'm not mistaken, the cannabis industry. People are opening up dispensaries everywhere. You know, it might be legal by the state, therefore they can sell it in there. But it might not be legal by the federal government. And thus, you may not be able to have a bank account. You can't have an FDIC insured bank account in something that the federal government doesn't see as legal. So, same thing happens at FTX exchange. You can have all your investors in foreign countries and foreign bank accounts, but you can't have a USD one. However, you can have USD investors go into a fund like Alameda. So what ended up happening was Sam started doing a no-no. Of course, he doesn't know these kind of things, and he doesn't want to listen to experts. You know, he doesn't want what he called the grown-ups to come in the room and try to get in the way of his vision. So he just like, hey, I have an exchange, I got a fund, it's all mine. You know, even though he's got a fund in his personal or his business wealth is up to like $100 billion, he's got no control over this whole thing. So what he starts doing is he starts using the funds in Alameda and the exchange going back and forth. Like they're all the same entity. He goes, I own it all, therefore I can do whatever I want with it. So money starts moving back and forth between something that has investors and something that really doesn't. And that's just a no-no in the business world. So what ends up happening? Okay, $100 billion. What if you lose a couple billion here and there? You don't care. You're making money hand over fist. In fact, Alameda, I think, was making like $1 billion a year for them. But what happened was, same thing happened in 2008 when the housing market happened. In the mid-2020s, late 2020s, the crypto market just crashed. It just tumbled. These things that were worth phenomenal per dollar per unit before just went down. And all of a sudden you have $100 billion practically being in the red. And the reason why this happened was whatever controls were in there, although there weren't many, that's why the SEC didn't like it, the controls actually failed because they were only meant to do certain things in the one direction. And the exchange originally actually had a little thing that would prevent people from losing a lot of money. So, for instance, if the losses went to a certain number, they automatically sold the position and cut the losses. Well, it kind of got circumvented by a different reason that Sam needed. For more color on something like this, if you ever watched the TV show Billions, watch the last season. It talks about how certain controls get one more time. It can talk about how controls can be circumvented and actually cause some problems. So, this thing starts going down. company's losing a ton of money. Now everyone wants to see books. They want to see, where is our assets now? How can we give investors back their money if we don't have any? And then they start realizing that they're missing billions of dollars. Like, there's a hole in their cash, in their assets, that this is just doesn't exist any longer. And no one knows where it is. No one cared where it was when things were well. But now it's just gone. And no one has the answer. And then, like a sinking ship, everyone just starts disappearing from the company. They're getting out of the corporate offices in the Bahamas. They're going somewhere else. It's just a true shit show's going on there. So, business. It's just business. What you're looking at here is eventually everything goes into bankruptcy court. People try to find all these assets and figure out where they are to give them back to the creditors that actually deserve them. Until finally November of this year, November 2nd, Sam Bankman-Fried was convicted of several counts of fraud, campaign finance violations, money laundering among them. In fact, he's scheduled to be sentenced March 28th of next year, 2024. So that's what the book is. Obviously, there's tons of more detail. There's many more stories. I took some snippets here and there because they were interesting. But there's a ton left behind that's even more interesting sometimes. I was just trying to get a narrative out there, which I hope I was successful in actually doing, because I do this kind of from the cuff, even though I have some notes here. But overall, I like to read these books. Again, I'm in industry, so to speak, so I work with alternative investments. So things like this, things like Too Big to Fail, or The Smartest Guys in the Room, they're all quick reads to me. And no matter what the thickness is, some of these are like tomes, but they're written so basically you run right through it in a heartbeat. And obviously, since I'm in industry, any of the concepts that come out there, I actually know. So I'm not kind of like fumbling over a couple pages like, I don't get it, which then loses the thread. And like I said, this is pretty short, 250 pages, or at least I think it's pretty short, but it's concise and gets you from the beginning to the end pretty well. Like I said, I got this from the library. It's due back today, so I'm not gonna be late with it. And this is very contemporary. This is new. So you haven't heard this specific story before. It deals with those markets that people talk about. You might not know much about it. So even for a primer into the crypto world, this would actually be one that you can get your hands on and enjoy it. In fact, I actually went to a bachelor party in Las Vegas in October. And the Hudson newsstand had like a whole display of this book. Tons of copies were out there. So like airplane reading, this definitely can be. You got a long enough flight, you can finish this book on the whole flight as well. So, hey, I hope you pick it up. I hope you enjoy it. You want to see more of these things, especially if you are the kind of person, which I think a lot of people in the world are, that like to see, the successful fail. This would actually, tickle your funny bone if that's the kind of person that you would, if you're the kind of person that gets into that kind of thing. One last thing I want to mention, and because this actually struck my funny bone so well. Here's my little epilogue to the story. Is, if for some reason, say, this becomes a movie, and I think the odds are pretty high that this will become a movie. I'm sure people are going for the rights of it, or the rights of his story, to actually tell it in either a movie fashion or some kind of mini-series on a streaming site. But if it were to happen, there is a role of one woman in here that it's unlikely how the author portrayed her would ever see the screen. At least in its full. I'm sure there's a lot of it that would. Because you're talking about a woman who loved Sam. Got to work with him. and just became infatuated with him. In fact, they had affairs all the time, but it was always like, I own this company, I work in this company, and while I work high in the company, we shouldn't allow the fact that we're going to bed together ever to get out publicly. Because a lot of times, whenever that happens, if it fails, now it's just awkwardness. But then again, Sam was kind of an awkward guy, it seems, so, that would kind of fit the bill. But this girl loves this guy and does everything that she can to help him, or, let's say, even prevent him from something bad happening. And from one perspective, she's the perfect businesswoman. I don't recall if they go into anything about what she looks like physically. However, when you're talking about that powerful business executive woman, it's very easy for the mind to generate a very attractive or slim or whatever kind of woman. So, just successful businesswoman, people would line up to play this girl. However, there is the major, major weakness of being in love with the boss. Okay? Which, depending upon how you portray it, would say, what's your motivation for this? Between, I know what he's like as a person, I'm one of the few, I'm a good confidant, and that's why I love him, to, hey, this is my ticket up in the world. The gold digger kind of thing, which I don't believe she is, but depending upon the writer and the director, you can go in either of those directions. Okay? But even while she's banging this dude, she would talk to him in memos and write to him being like, you should profess your love for me like I profess my love for you, and here's some lists of pros and cons of why we should be together, and actually present it to him. And he would actually send a memo back to her. So they're talking through this medium, which was odd, but, give people credit for whatever they give. But this is where it starts to get a little bit not friendly for the screen. Because there are times that she almost cannot work because she doesn't know what their relationship is like. There are times that she's just so in love with him that she can shut down business-like even. So you have almost like the swooning damsel in distress, I'm helpless without him type of mindset. And I don't think Hollywood could or even would dare say that there's a woman, a smart, young, successful, powerful businesswoman, whatever, need a man. Crawling on the ground. Why don't you love me? That's not the character that would ever make the screen today. Unless you need that character for some reason, but it wouldn't happen. It's again, there's the interpretation of the writer if he's actually saying the truth in things or if it's what he feels versus, oh, we're actually going to put this on the screen of that writer of the screenplay. So, and again, I'm glossing over some of these things as well as I say this, but that's just what it is. I don't know why. My mind is tangenting for some reason. The fact that that kind of woman would never make the screen reminds me of a skit that Bill Maher has on his show on HBO, Real Time. And he talks about, there's the thing on his new rules, and he has this unified theory of wokeness. And he pokes fun at a movie that came out called The Aeronauts. And The Aeronauts was a story of a number of scientists that broke the record for the highest altitude they can fly in an air balloon. Okay? And in reality, the scientists that did this were men. But all of a sudden, in the movie version, one of them was made into a woman, I'm sorry. So you have, instead of two men, you have a man and a woman, or the scientist that broke this record. So, and the director said, the reason why I made one of the people that did this a woman was representation is important. So therefore, we have to actually put more women in roles that their success. And this actually might even help other people who are watching the movie to try to go and do a thing. However, the woman did not do this. It was two men that did this. So now you've actually taken one real person, a real scientist, out of the story and replace them with something else. And while representation is important, the way Bill Maher moves it is saying, yes, everyone has to be represented. Women just do not get enough credit for the things that they did not do. Audience laughter, fade to black, bada bada. So that's the kind of thing here. So I do not doubt this will be a movie. I do not think if it becomes a movie that those attributes of the woman will ever make it to screen, because it will show some form of weakness, some form of I can't go on without you kind of thing, which isn't the, you got mail loving I can't go on without you kind of thing. It's more of a desperate love, which might not be a quality they want to actually have spread around. So, sorry for the epilogue. Popped in my mind, figured I'd share it with you, and you can do with that what you like. Oh wow, it's been about an hour now. So let me wrap this up. Thank you very much for listening. Again, this is Michael Lewis's Going Infinite, The Rise and Fall of a New Tycoon. You can find it everywhere books are sold. I'm sure you can find your Kindle copy. There might even be an audiobook version out for this. Wouldn't have mind doing it myself, but I'm not exactly fully in the industry just yet. And on that note, you enjoy the rest of your day. I have to get started, get some breakfast, and start my own work. All right? Bye-bye. I'll come back soon. I think I just had dropped another audiobook recently regarding Machiavelli's The Prince, and I'll do a review of that one as well. Bye-bye.